a topic really grabs Edward Hume's interest, it has a good chance of becoming a book. A very good book. Following receiving the 1989 Pulitzer Prize while at the Orange County Register for writing in depth on the military establishment, Humes left writing for newspapers full-time and focused on writing books. His first literary productions were true crime narratives. But it's our dirty love affair with trash that has us talking with Humes today.
I'm Edward Humes, and you've got too much trash.
America's largest export, most prodigious product, and greatest legacy. The biggest thing the United States makes is trash. We want to recycle it. We really do. Following China's cutback on imports, Spokane County has recently cut recycling efforts in half. One of Spokane's favorite environmentalists, Nick DeShais, joins us to moderate the discussion as we talk trash with Edward Humes on Northwest Passage's Book Club virtual forum.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Nick DeShais, and I'm very excited to be here across the screen from Edward Humes, who you just heard has written many books. And we can take any questions about any of those books, but tonight we're here to talk about Garbology, our dirty love affair with trash. Got the copy right here. So this was written in 2012, but as you heard in the introduction, there's some news in Spokane surrounding trash and recycling. So we're going to get to that right away. Well, thanks, Ed, for coming and meeting us over Zoom today.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. So let's just begin with the news and jump right into it. As you heard, the city of Spokane recently said it was cutting down how often it picks up curbside recycling from once a week to once every other week. The reason the city says is shrinking demand for recyclables. So I guess my question is, does it even matter? I mean, does recycling even work?
Oh, it matters, and it does work. It's just that we're really bad at it. And unfortunately, America is particularly bad at it. And recycling has also hit harder times than usual lately. It's kind of a quadruple whammy. First, there was the pandemic, of course, overshadows everything. And part of the pandemic, bear with me, there's a chain of events here. People are driving less. Oil prices have been driven down. There's less demand. Price is low, and plastic is basically an oil byproduct. So when the price of oil gets low, it becomes cheaper to make new plastic, and recycling plastic and trying to use that instead of virgin plastic just doesn't work. The economics aren't there. So even though some plastics are really highly recyclable, there's no market for it. So the recycling industry has crashed. That's one factor that's affected oil. So when oil prices go down, it's not always a great thing, at least in terms of our dealing with waste. We have less pollution, more in the air, more pollution on the land and the sea. Then China, everybody probably has heard that for many years, China was our go-to source for our waste, our plastic and paper primarily, but anything that could theoretically be recycled. And you're seeing a graphic now on how the recycling value of new plastic, price of new plastic versus recycled plastic, and you can see that line's going down for new and pretty much steady state for recycled.
Wow.
The China problem, they really propped up our recycling industry as in the 80s and 90s, as they became the manufacturing powerhouse of the world, and basically started making all of our products. They needed more raw materials, and so they were willing to take recyclables that nobody else wanted, that no American recycler would accept. Just literal garbage, all mixed together, not sorted, dirty plastics mixed together that couldn't properly be recycled except at great expense. They didn't care. They were going to take it because they turned it into products that they sold back to us at 1,000 times what they were paying anyway. So it worked for them. We got to pretend we were actually recycling when we were really sending 50% of that stuff over to China, where only some of it got recycled and the rest of it became a huge environmental problem for waterways and land and the atmosphere, because they were not doing this in the cleanest possible way. Fast forward to 2012, 2013, 2014, an environmental crisis is occurring in China. They had their own waste problem, and they started telling us, we don't want to take your really crappy recyclables anymore. We'll take really clean stuff, really good stuff. But other than that, we're going to shut down. And we basically ignored the warnings here. The recycling and the waste management industry just was selling this stuff that they didn't have to do anything to. They were literally dumping trash cans into piles, bundling it all together, and sending it to China. Yeah, wow, it's right. That's not recycling. And it was a game. It was a cheat on all of us, because we thought virtuously when we were putting all this stuff in the recycling bin, thinking, hey, good things are happening now, and they weren't. And come 2018, China said, that's it. We're not taking your material anymore. And suddenly we were in a crisis that everybody knew was actually coming, at least people in the industry knew, and hadn't acted to prevent.
In that 2018, was that the oil, because of the price of oil, or was that something to do with the trade?
No, because nobody else would pay for this stuff that at the rates that China would, and China didn't need it anymore. They had their own consumer, growing consumer sector that was making more than enough trash, and they didn't need our really unclean materials. They will still accept recyclables, but they have to be at the same standards that American recyclers would accept. So that destroyed the market. And instead of communities like Spokane, which could make money by processing recycling and selling it to middlemen, suddenly communities were paying to recycle their stuff. The market was shot. So that was the second part of the quadruple whammy. And then there's something else that most people maybe don't know about, but has anyone noticed that plastics are, like your water bottles and other things, have gotten thinner over time, less sturdy, easier to squeeze? It's called lightweighting, and it's really a great thing to do to save money if you're a manufacturer. It's really a lousy thing for recyclers, because each bottle now is worth less, and the economics of gathering and recycling just became terrible. So somebody's always got to pay the bill when somebody else is getting a benefit, and the recyclers have been paying that bill. So all these factors together have just ruined what was already kind of a fake news, to use a term I don't often like to hear. But recycling was kind of fake news for a long time, because it was really just getting moved around to developing countries. We're still doing that, by the way. Vietnam, Thailand, a few other mostly Asian countries are still taking in this stuff for us at a lower price and not in as great quantities. But it's, instead of finding a new solution, we just said, okay, China's not taking, let's dump our stuff on somebody else. We're still actually doing that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. I mean, it seems like this was a bad situation where we thought, oh, we're being virtuous, we'll send it off to China, and
right.
we don't care what they do with it. It might have been better if we figured it out locally, or at least nationally, how to recycle and how to have a good program.
Oh, this is a great graphic. Is everybody seeing this now?
I think so.
So I don't know, it didn't make a lot of news, but the EPA earlier this year came out with a report that basically blamed ocean plastic pollution on these Asian countries who are taking our stuff as being the main problem. And there is sort of a finger pointing that's really where this was coming from, and it wasn't our fault. So you can see from this chart that that's not true. The truth is that those countries manufacture the plastic. We're the ones that are throwing it away, because we get it, we buy it, we consume it, and then we throw it away. So the United States, even though we don't have the largest population in the world, we have the largest amount of plastic waste in the world, and we are the major source of the epic and destructive plastic pollution that is contaminating our oceans worldwide. So the fingers actually need to be pointed at us first. I mean, others contribute to the problem as well, as you can see from this chart, but
nowhere near as much
the
as
U.S. is double its nearest competitor.
What do these other countries do? If you look at UK or Japan, I mean, why don't they use as much plastic as we do? Do they just buy things in glass, or they don't buy as much stuff? I mean, what's the explanation there?
I think it's a combination of things. Other countries don't have the affection for disposably plastic encased products that we do. Many people in the world are kind of perplexed by our fondness for relatively expensive bottled water. we have one of the most enviable domestic water supplies in the world, with very few exceptions. Communities that have contamination problem. And of course, the dirty secret is most bottled water is actually somebody else's tap water anyway. And it's not all coming from Crystal Springs, So it's products like that are utterly unessential, but that are so dominant in our everyday lives that make us the per capita waste plastic generators at the top.
And we have on the same topic from a reader named Ellen. She wants to know what the countries do with their recycling. Do they have the same program that we have of finding some country that's willing to take our trash, basically? Or
sadly, as a whole, the European Union actually sent even more stuff to, not necessarily in the amount, but in the percentage they were sending abroad, even more than the U.S. So we're not the only culprits on that. It's just that we're sort of have the biggest footprint. Now, that it hasn't always, in the 70s when we really started to get serious about recycling, and if you're old enough, you remember that you had to sort your stuff. You couldn't all throw it into one bin. That was actually the model that creates recyclables that are clean, that are already sorted into general categories, and actually is more economically advantageous to recycle. But the waste management industry found it advantageous and more profitable just to all throw it in the same bin, because it made collection easier. You only needed one truck to pick up much of the material, and since China would take it, it was okay if everything got contaminated. If the plastic had some, pizza sauce on it, big deal. They'll take it anyway. That's a problem though, because really contamination ruins recyclables, particularly paper, but also other recyclables.
Yeah.
Now this is if you see these numbers here, this shows the rates at which the U.S. recycles various materials, and you can see that plastics, only 8.5% are actually recycled. So think of all that plastic that we consume, everything in your house, everything that you take home from the supermarket. That's the very tiny percentage that is recycled, and that's horrendous, because theoretically much more of it is recycled. Want to take a look at that chart that shows the different kinds of plastic, because you can see what is and what isn't recycled even at this pitiful rate. Can we see that?
Yeah, I don't have control of that.
7 kinds of plastic chart. There you go.
There it is. Okay.
So the first 2, 1 and 2, those are the things, the types of plastic that can get recycled. And the PET, or sometimes called PET, that's the water bottle, soda bottles, stuff that you see all the time. That's the easiest and most frequently recycled. And yet far more of it still ends up in landfills or in the ocean than actually gets recycled, because the economics are so poor. The second one, HDPE, is like milk jugs, detergent bottles, and those are pretty
thicker. Right.
Yeah, and those there has been, for most of the last 3 decades, a market for recycling that. All this other stuff, PVC, which is used in plumbings, LDPE, which is, we all know from the plastic shopping bag, styrofoam is, I can't remember if that's PP or PS. I think it's, polystyrene, yeah. We think that's like foam plastic for packing materials, but polystyrene is also utensils the plastic utensils you get with your takeout food. None of that is recyclable. I mean, theoretically, plastic industry say, "Oh, this is all recyclable," except nobody wants it. You can't do anything with it. So a theoretical recyclability isn't the same as a practical recyclability. So all this stuff
could literally recycle it. Like they have a process where they could recycle it. It's not impossible. They have a way to do it. It's just not.
Yeah, and like maybe there's a market for a car made out of gold, but nobody can afford it, right? and that's the same thing. Making products out of these materials is like that. You couldn't sell it because there's no way you could price it in an affordable way.
And we're talking a lot about plastic, and I think plastic is clearly the main culprit we're talking about here. But I just reminded Spokane City Hall here is technically built on a landfill. We had a great fire here in 1889, and they pushed all the leavings from the fire into a ravine, and they built the city over it. Not far from where I'm sitting, there's part of that ravine. I mention this just because it seems like we never really knew what to do with the waste we created. It seems like it's gotten worse now, but is there an origin story to this whole throwaway culture? Was there ever a time we're really good with kind of dealing with the waste we generated?
Well, that's a good question. No, but it's been an evolution. What we didn't have was a disposable culture in the past. I think there's one of the charts on there shows the growth of waste since the 1960s in there, and let me see if you can cycle through that. It's kind of a curved chart and shows how much plastic waste we've generated over time and other forms of waste. But
is that it there?
Yeah, well, that actually kind of shows a similar thing. You can see the growth of our wastefulness. But if you think back to even the era in the Depression era, people were very thrifty. They didn't throw out a lot of material because they couldn't afford to. And this value of thrift was considered a great virtue moving forward from those times, and having products that are durable and were kept for a long time and handed down. A dad would retire and give his tools to his sons so it could carry on the family business. When plastic was invented, people think of plastic as a curse now, but plastic was a miracle substance in its earliest forms. Making piano keys out of plastic instead of killing elephants for ivory was a wonderful advance. And you had this new substance that could be formed into really durable, really useful. That's the chart I was thinking about. So if you see in 1960, this is the growth of plastics in our waste stream, right? So up until the 1960s, we've had plastics since almost the turn of the 20th century. But we didn't have disposable plastics in any significant amount until the 1960s. So all those great products of the 20s, 30s, so this Bakelite radios, you've all seen them, they look like Art Deco masterpieces, and plastic was really cool. Now plastic is killing us because we make things disposable out of a substance that nature can't break down, can't absorb, can't be digested. The useful life of a plastic shopping bag that they used to give away for free in most supermarkets, and still do in many communities, is a few minutes, an hour until you get home from the supermarket to home. It has a life in the environment of 500 years or more.
Wow.
Yes, and plastic is an eternal substance. Who thinks it's a good idea to make a disposable product out of something that will never go away once it's in the environment?
And that's a good difference to point out, though. I mean, you've got the single-use plastics and the plastics that you can use over and over and over again.
Yeah,
so plastic in that form is perfect, but
I mean, we wouldn't have spacecraft without plastic, or modern airplanes. I mean, it's an essential product in the non-disposable form. Okay. And your home is filled with it. But the stuff we throw away and many people think, oh, I'll put it in the recycling bin, I'll be fine. Everything from plastic wrap to plastic utensils to your yogurt container to the margarine container, none of that will be recycled. And it's a failure of product design. It's a failure of engineering. because we could make things that either are durable, or we could make substitutions. We don't really need to get water that comes in a disposable bottle. We could, put water in reusable containers, or we don't have to have 50 billion coffee cups, kind of cafe latte madness, right? All of those cups have a plastic lining in them, so they don't get soggy and leak. And that means theoretically they could be recycled. In practice, they're not. They end up in the landfill.
Also means they don't biodegrade on the land or at all. They just live there forever, right? That plastic lining.
So we've created a non-essential way of life that's disposable, that isn't good for our planet. It's not particularly good for our economic well-being. Buying things that you continually have to throw away and replace, that's really not a thrifty way to live. So but we're so used to it, and we've created this amazingly efficient waste management industry that whisks it away. We roll it to the curb and poof, it's gone. Except it's not really gone. It's costing us in innumerable ways and harming us in our health and our environment and our economy. But we can't even hardly see it anymore because we manage it so well.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind. Where do you come down? It's something I talked to my friends about recently a lot. Just the whole, personal responsibility versus changing the system. Like I could recycle or use all the glass I want and reuse plastic, but does it really matter in the grand scheme of things if this global system is still creating so much garbage? I'm just curious where you kind of come down.
Yeah, I think there's there is no one solution, but I do believe that at the family level, at the individual level, at the community level, changing a lot of things that are very wasteful has very immediate and tangible benefits. I'll give you an example. Buying fresh, unpackaged food, going to the farmer's market and getting fresh vegetables that don't come wrapped in like 3 layers of plastic like they do at various supermarkets. Or getting processed food that comes in a lot of packaging and also with a lot of chemicals and a lot of salt and a lot of harm instead of fresh food. If you can make that choice, then you're eating better food, you're being less wasteful, and you're probably also going to be healthier too because you are consuming things that are better for you. And so making sure that communities have access to that as an alternative to, the drive-through for fast food, that's a really important thing to achieve. And those communities that do have the ability to make that choice, families that have the economic wherewithal to make that choice, why aren't you making that choice? Because if you look at the things that take waste out of our daily lives, and I'm not talking about global changes in policy, I'm talking about making choices as a individual consumer, or having institutions like college campuses or municipal governments using their buying power to make those kinds of choices. You get multilateral benefits. You cut down waste, but you also make people healthier, or you improve the environment, or you save people money. Well, we were talking about what Walmart thinks about sustainability, right? And I like the example of what Walmart does in this one little realm, anyway, of waste reduction and sustainability, because they equate making these choices with making more money. So they say, hey, these products have a lot of wasteful packaging. What happens if we make the packaging smaller? Or what happens if we ask the manufacturers of laundry detergent to stop making these giant bottles, which are just filled with a lot of water and a little bit of soap, and make concentrated detergent to come in smaller bottles with the same amount of clean, but take up a third of the space and a third of the weight? What happens if we start making decisions like that with all the products we sell? Well, they start not burning millions of gallons of gasoline to ship stuff around, because suddenly things are smaller and need less trucks and way less. They're not consuming a lot of unnecessary water in their detergent. They're not having to recycle huge amounts of cardboard and materials because they've reduced their consumption of that. And it's always better to not use the material than use it and then try and recycle it, because you get much more bang for your buck that way. So they've reduced their landfilling by 80%. They've made choice after choice that has not made them sustainable, but has made them less damaging to the environment. And when consumers choose to get a product that is less harmful to the environment, maybe they're not being good, but they're being less bad, and that's moving the needle in the right direction. And if we keep making choices like that, then you start to see it's the power of whole communities doing something small. Suddenly it becomes big.
Nice, great. You bring up Walmart, and it made me wonder if there is a market-based solution to fixing this problem, or do we have to, tax garbage and waste or some way, or is there another solution there where the person or the company or the manufacturer is on the hook for
well, it's often how you view what we would call a market-based solution. So think about a manufacturer who makes a plastic product that ends up in the ocean, contaminating our seafood supply or harming sea life, or despoiling a beach that once was a tourist destination but now is covered with debris. All of these scenarios are accurate. They happen. The manufacturer of this destructive product bears no responsibility for the choices they made. Would a market-based solution be holding the creators of something destructive responsible for it? Should they have to bear some sort of financial face a bill basically to pay? Because right now they're not paying their way. We're paying their way. Yeah. If I drive over to your house and dump a bunch of garbage on your on your property, you could take me to court. You could sue me. You have a recourse, and people would think what I did was wrong. Well, I personally think that viewing the creation of a harmful product when you could make a different design choice and choose a product that's not so harmful, there should be a price for that. The public shouldn't be subsidizing the creation of waste. And we subsidize waste in so many ways. Look at the phenomenon of junk mail. Does anybody? We still get it. No matter you get on the list, you try not to get it, it still comes. Right? It's unstoppable. Does anybody actually want that? No. Why do they get the least charge for postage of any form of mail in the country? Everyone who pays the price of a letter is actually subsidizing the junk mail that it arrives along with your letters. I don't want to subsidize that. Does anybody? And yet we do. And you see these perverse incentives for waste throughout our economy. And if we wanted to get serious about dealing with waste, we have to eliminate the incentives to be wasteful and create incentives to be not wasteful. And that is, in my mind, a true market solution.
Yeah, that'd be great. So when we first started talking, you brought up the pandemic we're living through right now and how it's kind of affected the price of oil. But another type of garbage that I'm starting to see around town are the little paper masks that somebody throws on the ground. They're everywhere at this point now, unfortunately. Have you looked into how the pandemic has affected people's trash habits? And is there, or can you describe the relationship between public health and waste generation that we've had?
Yeah, and well, there's no question that since the pandemic started, that we are creating more waste in the country, and I'm sure other nations are facing this than we did prior to the pandemic for a variety of reasons. Part of it is we're shipping more stuff instead of going to get it, so there's a greater sort of consumption of disposable packaging. But there's other factors at work, and medical waste is one of them. Medical waste was already about 1% of non-residential material going to landfills, and the curve of the increase in medical waste over time is kind of the same with disposable plastics in the consumer sector, and it used to be a lot of medical devices were not single use, and we talked about this before the show, that the first disposable, one of the first disposable products in America, the Dixie cup, it had another name at the time, but it later became the Dixie cup, a paper cup basically, was for medical reasons, for sanitary reasons, to avoid the transmission of disease, because the convention at the time was you could have a public water pump or water supply, and there'd always be a ladle or a cup there that everybody would use and drink out of. And of course, as understanding of how diseases spread, people realized, hey, we need an alternative to that, and hence the paper cup was born. And in that sense, it was life-saving. But that lesson has been extended to everything in the hospital. So they used to use syringes and put them in autoclaves and sterilize them and use them again. Now everything's disposable and one use. And there is a disease prevention argument to be made, but there's also a profit motive, because the hospitals can bill everybody for multiple of the same thing, and do that for everybody else. So the tubing, the syringes, everything is billed at if you look at your medical bill, at a very exorbitant rate, and they get to do that over and over again. So there's a medical reason, but there's also a profit-making motive behind it, and it's created phenomenal amounts of waste. Every time surgical gowns aren't laundered anymore, now they're just thrown away, and it's mountainous. And now we have the face masks and other PPE, personal protection equipment, is all disposable, and we have a shortage. So they're literally now trying to find ways to clean the disposable stuff, which wasn't designed to be, and reuse it. And now there's an economic case and a medical case to be made for, hey, maybe making everything disposable really wasn't a great idea, particularly in a pandemic. So now the medical establishment and supply industry are sort of trying to figure out, maybe we need to strike a different balance and have things that can be more durable and can be reused safely. And that's something that's, I think we're learning that lesson. But right now, the typical delivery of a child in a hospital without major complications generates 20 pounds of medical waste just for the one procedure, not counting the biological waste itself, but all the stuff that they use, the tools and the gowns and everything is thrown away. And think of how many births there are and how many procedures like that are done in a hospital, and it's a phenomenal amount of waste.
Yeah, maybe if we consider the amount of garbage we produce a public health problem, we'll fix it in that situation. Somehow it'll click in our brain.
It's a public health problem.
So you have an interesting section in Garbology. I really liked it when you follow the trash trackers. I think they were out of Seattle, if I'm remembering correctly. They put GPS transmitters on pieces of garbage and see how far they went.
Seattle was one of a number of communities they did this in, but it was actually being run out of MIT in Massachusetts.
Oh, MIT. Okay. Yeah. So went 300 miles, and an ink cartridge for a printer went like 4,000 miles.
It traversed the country multiple times. Yeah, it's it was what nobody really knew what the disposal chain looked like. That industry has carefully studied their supply chains to make them incredibly efficient, when they are making things or taking them to market. But the afterlife of products, we just haven't been good about thinking about the end of things. And the disposal chain is chaotic. It gets it's fragmented, and things that need to be recycled will be taken to a wholesaler midway across the country and then be shipped back to like something within 10 miles of their destination in order to be recycled. And there's no efficiencies built into that system. But nobody knew that until these really clever people at MIT took little tracking chips, GPS tracking chips, and glued them inside pieces of different pieces of trash just to see what would happen to them. So they used electronic waste, all ended up starting, disappearing off their tracking charts because they were leaving the country. But some of the other things were really surprising, like that printer cartridge you talked about.
Yeah. I think it went
to tour of the country.
Chicago to California.
Yeah.
Well, and I just wanted to bring it up because, it's, the garbage we create is one problem, but it seems like the carbon emissions that are created just moving this garbage around might be an even bigger problem. Has that been measured at all? Or?
Yeah, well, there is the transportation problem of products as well as the, when you look at the life cycle of something, in order to study its footprint, you look at, its entire life, including its transportation to and from its user. So yeah, that's part of it. There's also the emissions from waste itself. If we can see the garbage mountain picture, the first one.
Oh, Garbage Mountain, Southern California, LA.
Yeah. So this is one of the characters in in Garbology. Was then the largest operating landfill in the country. Can you go to the one with the power plant? So this is a top. It's really a plateau of of garbage. It's 50 years worth of Los Angeles's trash, and it's the 12th tallest structure in Los Angeles. It contains about 300, I believe, about 300 million tons of garbage. It's phenomenal. So I've been up on top of it. It used to be a valley, and surrounded by hills, and it was pasture land for dairy cows, and it gradually had filled it up so that that's now one big plateau, and you could put LA's new football stadium with plenty of parking on top of this thing. But there you go. That's what it looks like. But that power plant captures some of the methane emissions, actually most of the methane emissions that are generated by any organic material in this landfill, and generates enough power for 50,000 homes to power them. So it's methane emissions are a huge problem with landfills, and not all of them have the ability to capture it. Some burn it off, some don't do anything with it. They decided to try and make power out of it. So it's a variation of the waste to energy idea that Spokane has pursued. This is a little different. They have these pipes laid inside the garbage, and they suck out the emissions before they get in the atmosphere, and then consume it as garbage gas power. It's kind of cool. I mean, garbage gas is a really terrible fuel, but it's better than letting it into the atmosphere. It's just like burning plastic and other waste in incinerators is like a terrible fuel, but it's better than nothing, I suppose, if you can control the emissions.
Yeah. Well, that's I don't want to leave the viewers from this.
Yes, now for the hope. Right?
But I mean, that's one, you can look at kind of the silver lining of things, this trash mountain. Hey, we're powering 50,000 homes, and, or we figured it out. But what are some things that we can do or that we could feel good about when it comes to this topic?
Well, there's a lot. And I'm glad. Let's talk about that a little bit, because we did talk about a little bit about making choices in your diet, for instance, that are less wasteful and also helpful. There's a lot that we can do, because in these partisan times, waste is one of the few things that nobody's for waste, right? And it's also the one thing that anybody can do something about. And one of the families I profile in the book, the Johnson family, really took that and ran with it. If you go to the other Johnson family slides, there you go. They decided to look at how they were consuming things and what the results of that were. They had a job change and had to downsize their home, and they started they needed to get rid of some things that there was no room for, furniture and other things, and they realized they had accumulated a lot of stuff that they didn't really like or need or want, and in doing that, they realized that they were wasting a lot of their precious resources. And then they started realizing they threw away a lot of stuff in general, even after the move. And they started thinking, and they created this list of questions. Bea Johnson, the woman of the house, basically told the two boys and the male of the house that they were going to get in line with this program and start being more thoughtful in how they bought things, and everything from thinking about giving gifts for special occasions that weren't things, but that were experiences, like, you know, a family vacation or a game night. I mean, it could be almost anything, but it wasn't a thing that would someday be thrown away. It was an experience that they could enjoy together. And they found that they kind of liked that. And then they started buying mindfully. You know, one great way not to be wasteful is to buy things that are used or refurbished, because then, well, you're saving money, but you're also giving new life to something that might otherwise be thrown away. So, you know, eBay and Craigslist are actually great anti-waste devices, as well as economic benefits to people on both ends of the transaction. So they started trying to shop that way and buying things that weren't processed and packaged. And then she really got enthusiastic and started making her own cleaning products. And so the result of that was they saved a lot of money and could start taking really cool vacations. They felt like their family expenditures went down 40% because of their anti-wasteful choices. And they also reduced the amount of waste that they couldn't recycle or compost or reuse for a year could fit inside a mason jar. Most people in America, at the rate we waste, generate 1.3 tons of waste per person in the household. They fit theirs in a mason jar and lived a very nice and delightful life, and seemed very happy. I don't know that most of us could achieve that result, but it's sort of aspirational. We could all do a lot better than we're doing. You won't find any bottled water in her house or packaged food. She gets everything in bulk. It's just, you know, it's cheaper that way, right? Their health is better. A member of the family who tended to be overweight is not any longer. It's had many benefits, and they feel very proud of themselves, and justifiably so. So it's a great story, a great example of the multiple benefits of knocking waste out of your lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That pretty much brings us to the end of this talk. Is there any last words you want to say on Garbology or on garbage or on recycling to our viewers?
Oh, yeah. I think that it's really more of a mindset than anything else. That it can feel really convenient to buy something that's disposable, but not doing that and using those resources for something else usually leads to good things, and it's a much better feeling than throwing it into a recycling bin. And now that we know it's not going to get recycled, that's how I feel about it.
Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us here virtually. If you missed any part of this, you can catch the replay of the conversation on the Northwest Passages past events page, Facebook. Where every event is available for free. It's also on spokesman.com. This is made possible by our event sponsors, Avista, Numerica Credit Union, and the Inovia Foundation. Go to spokesman.com/northwest-passages for all the details. And I want to thank you, Ed, for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Nick. And thanks to Jess, too, our producer, who's been doing such a great job.
That's right.
Volcano eruptions aren't merely events of legend. Sometimes they happen in your own backyard. This momentous occasion's 40th anniversary was this year and was the prompt for the Spokesman-Review's Summer Stories series, featuring 17 stories from authors around the region. Compiled into a book for the first time, sponsored generously by STCU. All of the profits from the sale will be donated to Spark Central. Thanks for joining us today. All of our videos and discussions are archived on our videos site, which you can access for free. If you feel compelled to buy a ticket, please take that cash and instead make a contribution to the Community Journalism and Civic Engagement Fund via the Inovia Foundation. We appreciate your support.